Well, welcome, Heath, to the latest edition of Rally's Founders Talk. It's a pleasure having you here. Rally, as you know, because you are a rally maker and an important one. The reason why we exist is to help passionate entrepreneurs transform their ideas and existing work into sustainable ventures that create positive social change. The other cool thing about us is that what we desire is to be an international hub for social entrepreneurship, right? So no matter where you're at in the world, you could be in Canada, you can be in Singapore, you can be in Africa, you can be in Australia. You should make a stop through Orlando, not because of the mouse, but because of us. And we can help you to move your business forward, right? And part of that, making that case, is that we have to showcase the talent, the resources, and the networks that we have available here. Unfortunately, you're one of those people. So there's a lot of pressure on you, but we're happy to have you here, man. How you feeling?
Good. I couldn't tell if you said fortunately or unfortunately, but
I said fortunately.
I'll just let it slide.
I said fortunately. Well, hey, listen, man, this is how we like to start these things off. Baby Heath, when's the last time you thought about him?
Baby Heath?
Yeah, Baby Heath. It's been a while, right?
I think I was at my parents' house over the weekend and they had some baby pictures. So it was over the weekend that I
cool.
I thought about Baby Heath last.
Yeah, well, that's good, because what we want to do is we want to talk about Baby Heath and really not the diapers Baby Heath wore or the food he ate, but more important, like the things that helped shape Baby Heath into the person he is today. And like, what were those things that had influence when you think back about who that person was that had influence on you becoming the person you are today?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to grow up in a really awesome home. I've got two older sisters. My parents are incredible people. They both served in the Vietnam War. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a medic. That's where they met. And they've just been a solid foundation for me. So I'm grateful to have that as part of my story. And as far as what, kind of the shaping elements of what I do today, I've always been interested in solving problems, even at a young age. I would leverage Legos and other toys that I had to like build very practical things for myself and others, and always enjoyed building things. And in high school, taught myself how to write code, started building websites for my neighbors, and attempted the best I could to leverage those skills to solve problems for others. I think in a parallel path, kind of a shaping element of Baby Heath, if you will, was I was always really into sports, and I think reflecting back now, I don't know that I was particularly great at any of them, but it taught me a ton about life and discipline and teamwork and how to lead and what that looks like. And so, those components of my childhood started to come together for me early in my career. I grew up in a small town, Brooksville, Florida. At the time when I was growing up, it was a small farming town, you could say. And when I wanted to go to school to learn a little bit more about software and engineering, I chose to go to UCF, University of Central Florida. I know we got some Knights on the call. We got probably some Knights that would be listening. So go Knights. So I decided to go to UCF and study computer engineering. And around that same time, this was 2004, a good family friend of mine, Josh Brown, who's also a fellow rally maker, he had recently started a company called Innovative Data Solutions. And he was building software primarily for public safety. And he asked me like, hey man, I've got a couple, little projects going on, a couple products that I'm trying to build. Would you like to write some code with me? So I started, I started building some of the products that are out there today, PowerDMS and Power Details. And this was, early stages, early startup years, writing code for my dorm room over at UCF in 2004. So that's kind of like the early years. Is that into your baby Heath question?
Well, one thing that comes to mind first off is I love the idea of you building code in your dorm room, and it puts you in the Napster category. To me, I always thought of the guy
Napster.
yeah, or Zuckerberg building code in his dorm room that launches a business that he does well with. It's really cool. But the other thing that you mentioned there was like that you felt like was formative was playing on teams and being part of a team. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because part of my conception of you is like a super organized and productive, detail-oriented guy, but also like wanting to do things with people. Part of my concept of you is wanting to do things with people. And that's not always something that we think about when we think about an entrepreneur or talk about an entrepreneur. We tend to talk about problem solving, creative, risk taker. But I think that team builder is a really important aspect. Could you talk about how you think about team building is that a component that you think about when you think about an entrepreneur or starting something?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's critical. I think any investor will tell you one of the biggest things they'll kind of grade an opportunity on is the team, is the people, right? And not only obviously one individual's proximity to a problem and understanding that problem and being equipped to solve that problem is important, but have they surrounded themselves with people that have strengths that they don't have, and vice versa. And I think for any entrepreneur, you've got to recognize that you don't have everything you need for your business to be successful, and surrounding yourself with the right people, like-minded, that also share a similar kind of passion for the problem you're trying to solve is critical. If you can't do that, I don't think you find success. Certainly not, definitely not at scale. So yeah, I think I was fortunate that in the early stages of my career, the business partner that I partnered up with was a family friend, high amount of trust. Our families grew up together, and that's critical to have, obviously. And when you're trying to do something hard, you're inevitably going to get into it's going to be messy and hard, and you got to have people that you've invested time and energy in building relational equity and being able to do that, those hard things together.
Yeah, what was I want to track back to when you and Josh Brown. So you're in your dorm room, and this wasn't the company.
In your dorm room?
What's that?
Did you have posters up in the dorm room? I had because I was.
Of course, I have posters up in my dorm. Who didn't have posters up in their dorm room?
I didn't have posters in my dorm room.
Paul Simon.
Paul Simon? Is that what you had?
Yeah, that's what I had. That's me in 2000.
That's awesome. I think I had like a picture of like a F-117 Nighthawk. I was obsessed with like different like jets and things at the time that were fascinating, and how they built those stealth jets. So that was the poster in my room.
I needed a picture of you programming in your college dorm room. It's perfect.
I can send you that. Okay. I have one. I think I have one and only one picture of that, but yeah, I can send that to you.
That's cool, man. Listen, so let's talk about that picture. What would be, actually, I'm sorry, you guys, both of y'all threw me off. Like y'all going this thing about y'all college dorm rooms. So the question that I was going to ask was did in the early stages, this wasn't the product that the company wasn't formed yet, right? It was just him doing some side stuff, and he just needed some help.
Yeah. So the founding story of the two products and later companies, PowerDMS and PowerDetails, is really, most credit goes to Josh Brown. He was the director of IT for Hernando County Sheriff's Office. And he grew up tinkering with computers, and also self-taught coder. And he was, as the director of IT for a sheriff's office, really close to a lot of different problems that a law enforcement agency was facing at the time, and also happened to be really close to what technology was capable of. These are the early years of web-based applications, and he knew how to build those, and he saw a bunch of problems that could be solved with web-based technology. And so he could kind of see the adjacent possible business and product opportunities. And so he built the original version of PowerDMS. And when I joined him in 2004, we built the original version of PowerDetails. Both of those products have evolved quite a bit since then. But those were built within this company called Innovative Data Solutions. And Innovative Data Solutions was building multiple products, even had some service offerings at one point. And then as those products took off and got traction and kind of became a brand that was well known within the industries that they're trying to serve, that's when the kind of formal companies were formed.
Because one of the things we talk to our entrepreneurs about, well, before I go into this, one of the things I always talk about is how being very close to the problem, it's helpful, right? Like some startup, and I see this all the time, like people going out searching for problems, right? We're just on a call recently for some guys that just felt like they were just searching for wherever problem that was out there, and they had really zero ability or zero understanding of the problem. They've never really worked in those industries at a deep level. And so that resonates with me, like when you're so close to it, you're in it. And I've heard the story many times that a lot of companies are founded from high-level employees who are very intimately familiar with how processes and systems work. Yep. They keep running up against it. They talk to colleagues who have the same issue, and they're like, hey, I can actually solve this, start a company, and they do that. And so it's really cool to hear that level of intimacy in y'all's story. Yeah,
there's a good author on that topic, Stephen Johnson. He writes a lot of books. One of them is where ideas come from. And he talks about this concept of the adjacent possible. And the adjacent possible is you got to be kind of on the edge of what technology is capable of, what market needs are. You've got to be right at the edge of that to even see what the next adjacent possible opportunity is. And so, yeah, my encouragement to any entrepreneur, first of all, proximity to the problem, it being your own problem or a problem that you're intimately familiar with, is like essential. It's critical. And I don't think it's hard to be successful without that. And obviously you got to make sure it's a problem you care about solving too, because in order to have the stamina to solve it, there's got to be some conviction about it being a worthy problem to solve. But the other thing I would encourage you, back to the team, kind of tying these things together, is make sure you form a team that also cares about that problem, but make sure that their proximity to the problem is really high as well. Even now with the teams that I lead, it's large groups of people. We're still very focused on making sure that every individual, regardless of role, is regularly as close as possible, to the problem, to the customer, understanding the customer's voice, because it's very human to like want to solve problems for people, right? And so when you have a face to understand the problem, what their pain is, and a deeper understanding what that pain is, you're gonna work from a little bit more conviction. You're gonna work with a little more purpose, with a little bit more energy than you would, otherwise. So it's proximity problem for founders critical, but don't think it ends with you as the founder. You've got to propagate that throughout your culture. I think that's my belief, anyways.
Yeah.
To be as successful as possible.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I agree with that. Where my mind naturally goes is that you talked about how proximity to the problem and all of those things. When at some point you said, okay, this is real, right? Like I can stake my life on this, right? Because it sounded like you didn't take another job. You just continued on with Josh, right?
Well, I can share that part of the story too.
Yeah, so I guess if you can include in that, just like, because we talk to our founders about, and our fellows about product market fit, and then getting there, and then understanding that once you find it, it opens up the customer door, opens up the investment door, opens up all these other doors. So what was that like? Because you obviously had to get to a point where you found it, and then once you found it, it allowed you to continue moving forward. So just talk about that moment.
Yeah. So again, I think for PowerDMS, Josh deserves the credit for achieving kind of the MVP, if you will, of that product. And I think, so first of all, to kind of complete his part of the narrative here, he built the original version of PowerDMS around 2000. He didn't leave the sheriff's office and do this full time with Innovative Data Solutions until 2006. So he worked on this as a part-time gig for about 6 years. All like there's a small group of us that all went full time in 2006, and that's really when I think the company had enough revenue to sustain it. We were bootstrapped. We didn't take any funding. We actually didn't take any funding into 2014. So we were bootstrapped for a very long time. I think I look back on that, and like, I think there's a lot of things I'm really grateful for. It again, from like a business perspective, it built a lot of discipline, a lot of cash discipline, and you make sure you hire the right people, and you pour all your energy into those people because you have limited resources, right? You can't really compromise, and you got to be sure you are absolutely building the right things and selling them the right way with the right price point and all those things, because again, there's just the feedback loop from the market is so like critical in a bootstrap business of whether you're building that right thing, the revenue's coming in from it, and then you have enough revenue to hire the next employee. All those things I think are great disciplines to build up. But also at the time, like frankly, the Orlando market and even the software as a service market that we were in, investment opportunities were a little less than they are today. And we were a couple guys from Brooksville. We didn't even know what that meant. We didn't know what that would even look like. Venture capitalists, what is that? So it was a long, kind of long road, but a great road, and one that I think is viable for many businesses, and sometimes doesn't get as much praise as I think it does deserve. Like, I think there's some businesses that can bootstrap, and I think some businesses should. I think we maybe overpraise fundraising a little bit, not too much. I think there's plenty of praise that should be given to it, but bootstrapping is oftentimes a good way to go.
So would it not, because because I want to, what you said was like, you said, hey, the first MVP was built in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Was it something that he sold into an existing organization or something he was giving away?
Yeah, he gave it to Hernando County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
To this day, they still have it for free.
Oh,
and
okay.
And this is another maybe point for you guys as founders. They were a great like partner in development, an organization that was willing to invest the time in helping Josh, the entrepreneur, understand the problem, iterate over the problem, give feedback, tight feedback loops, invest in that, but also, forward thinking as an organization. You want to find those, you want to hire good first customers, just as what you want to hire good first employees for your products.
Mm-hmm.
Because those customers have a high amount of influence in how your products will be shaped. And so hiring good customers is very important. So Hernando was one, and then there was a handful of others in the early years that did purchase the product. Again, I wish it was like a clean narrative I could tell you about PowerDMS journey or the PowerD, but it was an innovative data solutions. We were doing lots of different things and had kind of various sources of revenue.
But you came in what year did you come in?
2004.
2000. Okay, so it already been built for 4 years. He
Yep.
started the journey off in zero. He was doing it himself. You come along in 2004. 2013 is when you finally, did you say raise?
2014, we
2000. What happened in 2006?
We took our first investment in 2014. It was a minority investment from a VC firm out of Tampa called Ballast Point Ventures.
Okay, so up until, and then 2006, was that when, because I thought you said something about 2006.
Yeah, 2006, we had enough traction where Josh quit his job and went full-time.
And were you full-time?
What's that?
Were you full-time?
I went full-time in 2006. The equivalent for me was I switched to like taking classes at UCF, less workload, because I was a full-time student for 2004 and 2005, and then I switched to a part-time student, full-time employee for 2006.
Okay.
Until I graduated.
So nobody was really making money up until 2006. All the money that you generated was then being put right back into whatever thing. Mm-hmm. And then 2006, y'all finally felt comfortable enough 6 years later to everybody to quit and to then go full time on this.
Yeah, I was 4 employees at that point in 2006.
Yeah, so that the thing that strikes me about this is that we oftentimes, and I think, well, it's definitely to our detriment, forget how long this process is, right? That it doesn't just happen like in a year. Jason, so like it just takes time, right? Some businesses will hit it, be magical and overnight, but most are it's a long pathway.
Yeah, and even those, when you dig a little deeper, oftentimes you find that the story is long running, much started much sooner than
that's true
than anyone is reporting on, if you will. Yeah, I remember, I think it was around 2014, we had a little article come out in the Orlando Business Journal, and had some people come up to me like, oh man, you guys are like just like this overnight success. I'm like, I mean, if you consider 14 years overnight, I suppose, but I mean, we've been working hard for a long time, many years. So I do think that's another aspect of what you guys are in right now is what the press maybe picks up and how the story gets told doesn't fully reflect oftentimes the perseverance it takes to reach those milestones.
I mean, you're right, because Ben been trying to sell rallies since he was 14 in Lake Mary, wherever he's from. People are like, who's this fool? So it's been a long time.
Yeah, which is again back to like, you better care about the problem you're trying to solve, because you're gonna need to go to that well often to have the stamina to be able to make a difference with that problem that you're actually trying to solve. So that's one of the things I encourage any entrepreneur I meet is like, hearing their story and how they came about the conviction for the problem that they're trying to solve is really important in the likelihood in which they'll be able to see it through. And I'm not saying that that's always the case. Like sometimes people stumble upon, a really great business idea, and just because they know how to apply their strengths to a business idea, they can make it successful. But I think more often than not, these businesses are born out of someone's kind of personal conviction about the problem they're trying to solve.
So Josh was IT, you were tech guy. Y'all were selling and stuff. Who was selling it? You or Josh, or both?
All of us in the beginning, but we had one individual, Kevin Knox, who was the primary sales and business development, and he did most of the selling. Him and Ryan Robinson, who's also one of our.
So were y'all just like, hey, let's just sell people like Josh? Because
and we were all from Brooksville, and we all had family ties. So that's one interesting kind of.
Y'all have matching tattoos too?
No.
I mean, it sounds like you're really close, so you might have matching tattoos on your hands.
No.
So, all right, yeah, because the reason why I ask that question is because we have some of the individuals on our call, they have a high understanding of the problem, and then, but the question is, when you sell it, you have to connect it to some kind of business thing, right? And so I was just interested if you had any knowledge about that and how painful that process was.
I think. Well, selling is interesting because it's that moment where you kind of test the value in the market. You got to hold your line, and you got to hold your own line of where you think the value you're providing, and then you got to hear whether the buyer actually sees it that way. And typically, those are the moments where you learn a ton about the kind of viability of a business, the strategy you're taking with the business. So I think in the early stage of a business, I think everyone has to be involved in selling at some point, to varying degrees, but at some,
why?
I think it's important that it's a problem proximity thing. It's that moment where you're kind of the moment of truth. Like, are we actually solving a problem that someone would be willing to pay for, that would then provide the means to make this a sustainable change that of the good that we're trying to bring to the world? Like, is it sustainable? Well, is someone actually willing to pay for this? You gotta be there to observe that moment.
Yeah.
Keith, here's a question I'm thinking about, because I know that you talked about before it became PowerDMS, when Josh approached you, it had that other name where it was Innovative
Data Solutions. Yep.
Yeah. And that at some point it kind of narrowed to this one product service, PowerDMS. And then I know also that afterwards you started kind of Power Details, and that PowerDMS has been pointed to other sectors besides just law enforcement. And one of the things we run into with entrepreneurs a lot is helping them narrow down the opportunities and pick one lane to execute in first. Can you talk a little bit about when it's time to commit to one channel, when it's time to add another product or service or channel?
Yeah, boy, that's an art. So to Innovative Data Solutions, we built PowerDMS, We built some training software, some software for accreditation and regulatory management. And then we also built a product called Power Details, which helps law enforcement manage off-duty details. So all that was built under Innovative Data Solutions. And when we, prior to taking funding, we spun Power Details out because it was the one product that didn't necessarily fit as cleanly with the others in the value proposition. The buyer was different, like sitting at the deal table trying to sell this PowerDMS suite of solutions. It was kind of the redheaded stepchild there. Like they didn't really care to solve that problem at that same time anyways, and they're probably not the right person to even talk to about solving that problem. So we spun that out as a separate business. And then took the funding and kind of built around this PowerDMS brand from there on out on the PowerDMS side. And then Power Details is often running as a separate, I call them like sister companies, because they have so much similarities in the markets they're trying to serve, so much similarities in the culture and things of that nature. So that's the story behind that. But to your question, it's tricky to know how wide to go at what point, whether it's width with products or width with markets that you're trying to serve. I think what you're alluding to, Ben, is a very common pitfall for any entrepreneur. Is you can get excited about all the endless kind of possibilities of this thing, this problem space that you're working in, this market you're working in. But I think you've got to narrow your focus. Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to spin your wheels. And so I think you've got to find that niche and be comfortable with the fact that it will be, more narrow than maybe all your dreams could imagine. But you've got to build that traction. You've got to, stay in a space long enough and prove that you're solving that problem for that market in that way long enough. And then rest assured that there will be plenty of opportunities, no shortage of opportunities, that if you find success in that niche, either you can take your product to an adjacent market. Like right now, as you're alluding to, Ben, we started in law enforcement. We have over 3,000 law enforcement customers, but now we serve fire, EMS, healthcare customers. We have several Fortune 500 customers using our product. So I think when you go to build the product, think about those other markets. Like think about trying to solve the product in a more broad way. But go to market in a very focused strategy.
Yeah, I like that even law enforcement for you is different from fire, from the other public service agencies that you talked about.
Yeah.
And so when you started, you had to at some point make a decision. We're going to go to more law enforcement companies, not law enforcement and fire that's closer to us. We're just going to talk to more law enforcement companies.
Yeah, I think we've stumbled through that. And I think we still struggle with it to some degree. Because when you do get kind of organically pulled in another direction, someone says, hey, I know that you guys are selling this thing to law enforcement, but it'll solve our problem. A manufacturer, a large retail company, and they're like, we'll buy it anyways. Like we're not even marketing this, but we'll buy it anyways. I think you got to be really disciplined to decide if you want. Make sure that they'll be a good customer, right? You don't want to. You got to think about your brand. You don't want to jeopardize your brand, especially if you plan on getting into that market at some point in the future. So make sure that they will be successful. Take a very objective look at that and with your product, and then I think you got to be disciplined about how much you let their feedback influence what you're trying to do. And I think you can learn. Don't get me wrong. I think you can learn from those customers that are outside of your target market, but you've got to take a balanced portfolio approach with that. That's going to be your much less time invested there because you're really, really focused on growing in this specific market or with this specific product. And I don't think I've learned enough yet to give great advice on that. I have definitely struggled through it. We've at Season said, we're going to build this software for any industry that wants it. And then we've said, not hyper focused on law enforcement. Then we said, let's build multiple products for law enforcement and just, focus on that industry. And it's a challenge for sure. I do think times where we've seen maybe the greatest growth or greatest impact is when we've been particularly like, you got to match, let me say this, you got to be mindful of your capacity. It's a capacity planning exercise. If you know a target market and you know that your strengths and current capacity of people or product or whatever it might be can meet that market and you can focus on that for a season. If that success brings you more capacity, then you can reevaluate. Do we want to double down and use that new capacity to go even deeper into that market? Or do we want to take that additional capacity and use it elsewhere? But if you don't stop and say, does our capacity match our strategy? The strategy isn't what you're like saying you're going to do. Strategy is how you spend your time and money, right? That's really what strategy is how you spend your time and money. I'm learning from a new CEO lately, and he says when he asks somebody their strategy, okay, great, that's cool. Now show me your P&L, show me your books, show me where you're actually spending your money. That's actually your strategy. So capacity planning is figuring out how you're going to spend your time and money to attack a specific market with a specific product. And I think that is really hard to do. I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest.
Yeah, I like that. That is, thank you for sharing that, first of all. And I think everybody needs to hear that and be reminded of that because, like the dilution, especially in the early stage. I mean, there's only maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 of you, right? And so when you think about just the activity of just building, right? And then you think of the activity you're still learning, and then you think about you got to spend money, it's supposed to like, there's very little bit of any of that, right? And so being focused does have its advantages. And yeah, I really appreciate how you described like the notion of understanding like your capacity and taking a look at that before you move off into another direction, and how you use that capacity. I was interested in also asking a question around development, especially early on. What ends up happening, I think sometimes, is that we get feedback and you start trying to build out feature sets and things like that, and all of a sudden you built something that's maybe reflective of one customer and not necessarily where you're trying to go. But so I was just, my question is around, in the early years, how did you develop the product, and then what were the things that said, okay, this is the core product that we're offering, we need to obviously improve on this because this is where our value proposition lies, and then how did you make a decision to add features or features to that product as you move down the line?
Yeah, so I've probably messed that up more than I've gotten it right. But I've learned a good bit around that, and that's a great point. Because it's a great thing to talk about. Because you can build too much too early and get yourself into some challenges of either being flexible for other markets or being flexible for other variations of customers within the markets you're trying to serve. And so it takes a lot of discipline and diligence to balance the what to build. And so I think a couple of thoughts on that. I do think, as I mentioned before, the customers that you partner with, the prospects that you partner with, matter a lot. Are they like-minded? First of all, let me back up. I think every company, whether you acknowledge it or not, has a mission that they're on, a vision of where they're going, and a set of values that they operate with. And I think every individual, by the way, has that too. So if we broke it really down, like each person has a mission, vision, values, each company has a mission, vision, values. And ideally you're like hiring and growing a team that if you look at it as a Venn diagram, there's a high amount of overlap between an individual's kind of mission, vision, values and the organizations. And frankly, the organizations becomes the collective group of people. So customers, very similar. Like, are they bought into your mission? Do they align with what you're trying to do? And if you can find a group of early customers that do, not just the ones that are willing to cut a check, I think that's important, but the ones that are really well aligned, that like if you make them successful with what you're trying to do, you will see a glimpse of that mission being fulfilled. And listen to them, and then challenge them on what is absolutely like MVP. What is like, take the most objective look as you possibly can at what is the most important thing to build or provide, whether it's services or goods or whatever it might be, to do that, and be disciplined enough to say, like, that's where we're going to target together, and then we'll reassess. We're not going to get the list. We're not going to get if you give us the list, we're going to try to cut the list in half, or maybe more than half. Because if you build everything they could ever imagine, you're going to, build it all and then realize that, man, we overextended ourselves here. We overbuilt. So hire a great, customer to be partnered with you, but also I think diversity in that is really critical too. I think I'm probably contradicting myself a little bit by saying this, but if you've got a like target group of customers, I'll just use PowerDMS. Let's say you want to serve law enforcement, and that's where you've set your sights on. You want to serve law enforcement of various sizes. Well, make sure that you've got a close connection with customers that are of various sizes in the early stages, so that you can understand the problems that exist, and understand that, there's really a lot of overlap oftentimes in how you can solve a problem for one. You could solve it in a way that just solves their problem, or you could solve it in a way that actually solves all sizes, right? And so trying to be mindful of the other of the diversity of customers that you're trying to solve. Not every market, every person in the world could use this thing. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, with the market that you're targeting and the impact you're trying to make, find a little diversity in that. Even if it's in the individuals that you're seeking feedback from, make sure that there is some diversity there. But it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to figure out. It's part of the journey. You'll probably make some missteps along the way. Don't be afraid to start really small. Like I love paper prototyping things in the software business. Like, just sketch it and say, is this what you mean? Like, what's the quickest way to get on the same page with somebody? What's the quickest way to validate your assumption? And then once you're at a place where you've got some level of validation, and there's a bunch of literature out there, go read Lean Startup. I'm sure you guys teach us in the incubator. What is the cheapest, fastest way to validate your assumptions? You should just be like hammering that in your brain. But once you think you've kind of even validated, don't even be afraid necessarily to, like in PowerDMS, what we did, it's a bootstrap. And this isn't good in every scenario, but I'll tell you, it worked for us. We leveraged what's called technical debt. Like, we didn't go hire a massive team of engineers to build the world's greatest piece of software. We used the capacity that we had to solve the problems the best we could. And then when we solved them, we realized, well, man, we could have done this thing a little bit differently. And we would go back and readdress the code to make it a little bit better. And I see some entrepreneurs get so excited about their idea, get so caught up in thinking that they've got it all figured out. They'll go like spend a ton of money with an offshore team or even building an onshore team, and sometimes build too much at first.
I really like what you're saying about this product development, because in building this customer mix that you're talking about within your channel, and then being strategic about the customers that you choose, then I hear you saying building product components or feature components, not based on the customer who's telling you you don't have the feature he wants, so go away, like using the features as an excuse to not take you up, but taking input on what features to build based on customers who have committed to doing this thing with you, who have agreed that you are solving the seed of a problem and they need these other feature sets in order to make the product more successful. You're doing that in conversation with real customers. You're deciding your feature sets rather than off in your own isolation, just getting enamored with all the components you can build, or responding to every person who doesn't have the courage to just say no, and so instead tells you a feature that it's missing to say no, and then you go build that feature for someone who's not committed to you actually. So I like that idea of building the feature set in conversation with customers who you've chosen, a customer mix that's like, these people, we're going to build this thing together. That's cool, man.
Yeah, and I would tell you, I mean, there's a lot of tactics in this we probably don't have time for, and it probably wouldn't be the best use of time, but happy to connect with any of you outside of this to share some of those things. But I mean, you also want to factor in like the business dynamics, right? You're looking for ROI, right? Return on your investments. So to think about that, you got to contemplate what's the value that would be created if we did this, but also what is the effort it would take to create this thing. And a simple exercise of throwing that on a spreadsheet and creating some, unit for yourself, a scale 1 to 10, how valuable is this thing? How valuable would it be for acquiring revenue? How valuable would it be for retaining, customers, or strategically, how much value would it bring? That kind of thing. And then what's some really rough estimate of effort? And it's crazy once you do that exercise, how quickly you start to see priorities shift. And you can sometimes get caught up in the emotion of trying to solve the problem and even have that customer that you really want to solve it for. But if you don't take it back and put it in context of the whole thing and try to look at it more objectively, you might end up going down a path that was more emotionally driven, and you could have been potentially more strategic. I'm not saying create crazy processes and lots of extra overhead for how you make decisions, but there's basic, very basic tooling you can do to make better decisions.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying it, man. Like, the thing that resonates with me a lot, because I made this mistake, is building product, because you're sitting in your head, you're building what you believe people want. You're spending a lot of money, and then you put it out there and it misses the mark, and now you're trying to save $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 and stuff. And so I over the years I became a fan of, as you mentioned, like trying to prototype stuff as cheaply as possible. It was started on paper, and then one of the tools that I ultimately gravitated towards was this system called PowerDMS. Y'all can send us a check too. Yeah, so just give y'all a shout out.
Sponsor break.
Yeah, sponsor break. But yeah, PowerDMS.io, because it was like really cool. Like, you can like build these essentially PowerPoint slides, connect them all together, and it looked and functioned just like a system, but it was just dumb, right? It just didn't have data moving through. And to be able to sit with people and to show them and walk through that or let them use it, gave you the information that you needed to see if something was valuable or not, or where the sticky points were. But then all you paid was like $26 a month and maybe some time building it, right? Like you didn't spend the massive amount of money that you're talking about. That cost a building system. So
and don't just show it to people that will have some sense of like feeling like they need to make you feel good about it. Show it to your like biggest critics. You know what I mean? Show it. That's the thing. I feel like if I could send any message to you guys is objectively identify and test your assumptions. I feel like that's the biggest trap that entrepreneurs fall into, is they get so emotionally tied up into solving this problem. And you have to have that emotion, but you've got to set it aside, ask yourself as objectively as possible, what are my assumptions, and figure out ways to test those assumptions as cheaply and as quickly as possible. And I think so many entrepreneurs like get rah about their problem, and they'll show it to their friends and family who will never tell them that it's a bad idea, and they're off spending a bunch of money building this thing, and then they try to go to market, and the market doesn't want it. And I think that's one thing that hopefully I know that Rally is encouraging, but it's critical to the success, not just like even in the beginning, all along the way. Like I'm still having to come back to that discipline myself as we venture into new spaces, even at scale, having, what's the data tell me? What's the market data? What's the, I'm going to build this prototype. I'm going to show it to like our biggest critics, and not like seek their approval of it, but seek what's wrong with it, right? And that's such a hard thing to do, but it's critical for success.
Yeah, good stuff, man. I want to open it up because we have 11 minutes, but I want to open it up to some Q&A to the fellows. Anybody have some questions? Go ahead, pop in.
Thank you, Heath. Just quick question. Who is in those conversations about your validated backlog and about the kind of the log opportunities? You mentioned customer. Was business development in there as well? I know you were like, can you just talk me through like when the rubber meets the road, who were the ones that in the early stages decided on what to build next?
Yeah, everybody, especially in the early stages, you want representation from sales, support, engineering, really all business units. I think you want to have representation there, because everybody's bringing different perspectives to the table. And I think when it comes to the effort it might take to do something, obviously you're going to have to ask the people that might have to do it, right? And that's anything. I'm talking about like, it could be a new marketing initiative, not just engineering. It could be a new marketing. Okay, well, great. That seems like a great go-to-market idea, but how much effort would it take to do that? So, and then when it comes to the business kind of value of the thing that you might focus on or initiative you might do, I do think everyone brings like helpful perspectives to the table on that. So we try to get a wide variety of stakeholders, even at scale. We try to like have ambassadors, if you will, from each various business unit, bring their perspectives for their whole team to these types of meetings. That answer your question?
Yeah, and just one tag on was with your customers, can you talk just briefly through that process of validating that backlog with your customer? And you talked about the diversity of customers, like sorry.
Yeah, so we would, I think at our best, we do what I said we do, like low fidelity prototypes, and do usability sessions. If it's like a functionality thing, like, hey, here's some A/B, like here's different options that we've contemplated. Watch the customer use it. Watch a variety of customers use it. And I say use it, I mean, I'm like interacting with a prototype. It could be a piece of paper that you sketch something, right? And get their feedback on it. If it's like not necessarily something visual, you could certainly, articulate with words what the different options that you're considering of prioritizing as a business, and talk that through and allow the customer to rank them effectively, is also an option. We've done that with like surveys and things like that, or in more like closer settings where you're just like letting them kind of talk it out. Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Heath, can you talk a little bit about your first customer? You talked about the fact that they still have the product for free.
Mhm.
And can you take me back to that time, and do you regret that commitment to that customer, or do you just see it as do you see it as an investment that you made?
Well, I think that'd probably be, I'll answer it. And I think Josh Brown would be more appropriate to answer it. I think I don't regret it one bit. There's a lot more nuance to that story than I have time to share with you today.
Okay.
A lot of like personal, connections there, and how it came about. But applying it in a more generic sense to what you guys are doing, I would say, customers can bring you value in lots of different ways, right? Certainly revenue is the most obvious way, but if customers are willing to give you value in other ways, that's oftentimes a part of a fair exchange. That could be, hey, you're going to be a part of our product council. Hey, you're going to do a case study with us, and we're going to discount our product as a result of that. It's still a value exchange. It's still a trade. And I think, when I think about it in that light, that first customer's brought us more value than we've ever would have gotten from them as a subscription.
Thank you.
All right. Any other?
One point of caution with that, just it is really important to make sure that the customer you're working with would like actually pay. And you need to get to a place where a customer will pay quickly. Like if you stay in that realm of like, we'll just give this, you might not have actually properly tested. Are you solving the problem and providing enough value where you would generate a source of revenue and therefore produce some sustainability? Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, cool. We have room for maybe one question, definitely one, maybe two.
I'll just quickly piggyback. So Heath, on that note, making sure that they pay reminds me a lot about what we're doing with Wake Firm. So it's a departure from what we do, but still true to our mission. But that the kind of verbal agreement isn't that they pay us, but in fact that they give us the product at no upfront cost, and then we split in the sale of it. I guess, does that fall in line? I guess there's two-pronged question there. Does that fall in line with the kind of get paid by your customer to validate in your mind? And then also, does that I guess kind of picking up from what you said earlier and just like making sure that it's, a sharpened MVP where
Yeah.
you're kind of pivoting as well. So yeah, just your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm tracking with you. It's hard to say this or try to like talk about this without like using specifics of my story or PowerDMS story or something like that. But more generally speaking, I think you've got to make sure that the value that's being exchanged is both like fair and sustainable for you and your customer, right? And that value could be exchanged in a lot of different ways. It could be in a rev sharing situation like you're talking about, but is it sustainable for them? Is it sustainable for you? Is it a win-win? Do both parties come out the other side better off? And like continuously challenging that is important. And testing, can you like raise the price or can you lower the price? Like all those types of tactics I think pricing is really important for sustainability. That's one thing I think if I could go back and do differently, we would, is put more attention to how we price and more rigor around like making sure that it's a fair exchange, and holding the line on the value that we provide. I think those are really critical things to invest time in.
Perfect. Well, listen, Heath, I appreciate this. I got a couple of things I want to ask you. Heath Ledger or Daniel Day-Lewis? Just pick one. Which one do you like the most?
Heath Ledger
Or Daniel Day-Lewis?
Heath Ledger.
Okay. Heath Bar or Snickers?
Snickers.
Heathcliff Cat or Garfield?
I don't know that I know both of those well enough. Heathcliff Cat.
I just like the fact that your name is in all those, right?
Yeah, man.
So I figured you'd favor those with your name, but maybe that's just
I
me.
deviated on the Snickers.
You did. Heath bars are disgusting, actually. But
well,
but listen, man. With all that being said, we really appreciate. Yes.
Can I leave one parting thought to this group?
Go ahead.
In a Western society where we highly value or like put a lot of value as a society on money and on success, business success, things like that. I really think it's important to point out like a balance is so important. And I think you could find a bunch of business success and lose at home, and you'll get on the other side of that and have regret. So my encouragement to this group would be, when you go off on this adventure and you're doing it with conviction, bring those that you love with you. Meaning like invite them into the mission. Like maybe they're not actually like working for the business. That's not what I mean, but share, with your family, what you're doing, why you're doing it, those kinds of things, and really make them a part of the process, and make winning at home just as important as winning on this field that you're playing with your business, because I think you will not regret that. So that's my one parting thought, and I'm rooting for you guys. Excited about the work that you're doing. Here to help in any way that I can, and thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story.
Yeah, well, Heath, listen, man, it was great. I think that you've definitely have put a notch in our on our chest about why people should stop through Orlando, especially if you're involved in social entrepreneurship. So
Right.
With that parting wisdom, I appreciate you, and I wish you well, my friend, and
Thanks.
we'll meet again.
All right.